r/AskReddit by Reddit. Tour guides of Reddit. What's the worst thing a tourist has ever done under your supervision? Led a scuba diving tour. While signing the safety waivers and all that, one very old man kept telling us that he had a DNR, do not resuscitate. We plainly told him that we are not bound to a DNR, and if he passed out for any reason we would attempt to resuscitate by our safety training. Pretty much all the divers are assuming this guy's gonna kill himself down there, prob spit out the reg, and go quietly into the night. Dive happens. Pretty much everyone is hawkied on this guy. I see him go behind a large coral head and lay down in the sand and spit out his reg. He is only at about 60 feet, so I grab him and wrestle him to the surface. He will not take my backup regulator, so I slam it against his mouth and purge air into his face. We get to the surface, and he is fighting me non-stop trying to pull all of his gear off. I throw a very hard punch to his jaw and knock him out, actually trained to do this during dive rescues, to keep the panicked person from killing you too. 3 weeks later, and he tries to sue my dive shop and myself personally. TLDR, guy tried to kill himself. I used to do vineyard and garden tours for a pretty well-known winery. I had a lady ask to see any male at vines we had, so I walked her over, and she proceeded to dump ash all over them, and yell "We love you Nana. Rest in peace." Needless to say, you are not allowed to dump human remains on food goods. I should mention the ashes came out of a gallon Ziploc baggie. It was a Christmas themed one, so maybe that makes it more tasteful. I'm a bush pilot in Alaska and occasionally do glacier air tours if my boss asks. I'm not a fan of doing tours. One day I'm doing a glacier tour and had probably 7 people on board, and the dude sitting next to just looks at me and says I'm the captain now and yanks the plane 30 degrees to the right and then lets go and laughs, saying he was just kidding. There was yelling to follow via my mouth. I work in the backcountry ski guiding industry, working my way to becoming a lead guide. Guests are always trying to kill themselves, but here's one that stands out. Right now I mostly tail guide and pick people up when they fall, which is most of the time. One particularly deep day I'm sweeping a tree run and all of a sudden there's a man digging frantically in the snow towards a pair of legs. His wife had fallen headfirst down slope in a flattish area. When she lawn darted, the first half of her body was buried in the snow and only her legs and feet were visible. Her husband thought it was a good idea to stand on top where her face obviously was and start digging near the exposed part of her body. I guess in the moment he forgot about human anatomy and where her head might be. At this point I was maybe 3 minutes behind them, so she'd had her face under the surface for a while. I told him to stop and move, yelled "Stop, you're on her face." I tried added a couple expletives but nothing. I finally had to grab him by the backpack and powerbomb him down the slope. I uncovered her face in under 10 seconds. She gasped for air, had a cry, and then proceeded to tear that man to pieces verbally. Used to be a tour guide at a primate sanctuary with a strict no touching policy. At the end of the tour there's a suspension bridge. Tourists go first, guide goes last as per the rules. I always warn the tourists that the other side is the territory of a Hanuman Langa, and he doesn't duck around, keep your distance, etc. He doesn't attack people out of nowhere, but he likes showing his teeth and screaming, which scares tourists. Anyway, one tour I get to the other side of the bridge, and a tourist got bitten. He says a monkey just bit him out of nowhere. Asked the other tourists. No, he tried to ducking pet the Hanuman. Dumbus got what he deserved. On an open top tour bus in London, woman tries to dangle her toddler over the railing, then starts saying she's going to complain to my manager when I told her to stop. Caught her doing it again, and company policy said that anyone endangering their kids like that was to be removed from the tour, so the driver had to come up and march her off. She still insisted she did nothing wrong. Like, she literally had the kid's feet on the side rail of the moving bus and was just holding him loosely round the waist. One low-hanging tree branch, of which there were many on the route, and that kid was gone. Worked at an aquarium, this dude arrived in the Amazon exhibit room featuring the tank where every fish in it can hurt you, and promptly started dangling his sister's kid over the exhibit. I immediately stepped up to him and pushed the kid back from over it, firmly explaining that this wasn't allowed and that I'd have to call security. Thank God, the kid's mother was on my side and started tearing into the man. It took her 5 minutes of no, that was absolutely not appropriate, for him to get the message that he'd seriously ducked up. Some people never do get the whole pointy venomous fish bad, no dangling kids thing. I was working on a tourist island in Australia when this man pulled out almost all the back feathers of a peacock because he wanted to keep one. He sneaked up behind it and grabbed a huge handful and yanked them all out. He was immediately escorted off the island. The peacock had a huge bare patch and most of its beautiful feathers were gone. I have never seen peacock enclosures that didn't have feathers on the ground. So it's doubly bad, because if the guy had just been observant he probably could have gotten feathers without harming any of the birds. The peacock dropped feathers around the place all the time. We had a couple of them in our store. He didn't ask anyone if they had any, he just tried to grab one off the actual bird. We were all really upset for a while after. I used to work at a heritage site. It was an old military installation with a lot of remaining original structures, bunk beds, cafeteria equipment, computers etc. Every day it was a constant effort to remind people, kids, not to jump on the beds, not to slam doors open, not to punch every button like it owes them money. The absolute worst was a group of kids on a school trip. Within the first 10 minutes we are walking through the tech portion of the exhibit, where we had a wall lined with Burrow's large systems machines, B5000s, all behind this little fence about waist high. I turned to demonstrate some of the pieces, and when I look back at the group one of them had jumped over the barrier, opened one of the units, and started pulling out handfuls of digital tape from the reels inside. I just about jumped on the kid when their teacher did just that. She jumped the barrier, smacked the kid's hands, and took him outside. I immediately ended the tour and had them all refunded, as I couldn't imagine what else could happen. They took a big dump in front of the group. So, we tour through streets and parks and make it really clear that the toilets at the beginning of the tour are the only ones for the first 90 minutes of tour. We get to a park about 30 minutes into the tour. Not a big park mind you. It is basically a big roundabout with a swing set, bench and 2 trees. I'm in the middle of my spiel in the park when I see a guy at the back of the group step away, pull his pants down, and squat on the grass. Of course I was stunned and lost my flow, which had everyone looking around, only to recoil in horror as this guy drops a log like it was nothing. He wasn't even ashamed. I work at a brewery taproom and take people on brewery tours. During fermentation CO2 is produced and excess comes out through a runoff pipe and into a water bucket. One of the attendees, who was being a pain and trying to be funny but nobody was laughing, asked me what the pipe was for, so I gladly explained. He then asked what would happen if he breathed it in. In disbelief of his stupidity I told him he would pass out / damage his brain. He then proceeded to grab the pipe and take a breath. He was then ejected and barred. Some people are just beyond belief. I worked at a living history farm museum. I had a kid that was climbing on stuff the whole tour in the farmhouse and trying to get behind the smith in the blacksmith shop during a demo. After the tour, when people are allowed to roam the grounds, I hear his mom screaming and look over to the barn, and this kid has climbed the fence into the field with our longhorn oxen and is trying to poke them with a stick. I walk over and calmly told him to get out of the field before our lazy oxen decide they've had enough, but this jackoff decides to look me in the eye and smack Ted on the ass with the stick, like it's a riding crop. Ted, bless him, just kinda jumps a little and whips his head around with a WTF dude look on his face. But seeing as he's a longhorn, he just wipes this kid out with one of his horns. When he turned his head, kid goes flying into the dirt and is having a meltdown. Mom is freaking out. I'm like, dude, get the hell out of the pen before Ted actually gets mad. So this kid is crying and trying to climb the fence out of the field, and Bill, who has been watching this whole thing, waits until the kid is almost over the fence and walks up to him and nudges him in the butt with his nose and pushes him off the top of the fence. It was everything I could do to keep from laughing. Kid was fine. Ted was fine. but the kid and his mom were promptly kicked out of the museum. Their dad and little sister were allowed to stay because she was well behaved and was just enjoying petting the goats at the petting zoo. So since the kid had to leave, but his sister didn't, there was a temper tantrum in the parking lot that could be heard all the way to the other side of the farm. But the oxen got some extra grain that night, so I guess they won in the end. You had oxen named Bill and Ted? Excellent. Together, they are wild oxen. Cue air guitar. Thank you for watching Reddit. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more r/AskReddit videos. Share your stories in the comments section below.